Let's start a church, James. We can't keep suffering like this. Look around. Those pastors don't struggle like we do. They have everything: big cars, mansions, money. People need hope, James, and we can give it to them. Sarah said, her voice sharp with determination. James looked up from the pile of bills scattered across the table. His brows furrowed. A church? When was the last time we even went to one, Sarah? We don't even know how to preach. Sarah smirked, her eyes glinting with mix of desperation and cunning. We don't need to preach, she said. We just need to perform. James had worked hard for years in his corporate job, believing it would provide a stable future. But everything changed when he was suddenly laid off. One moment, he had a steady income. The next, he was left with nothing. At the same time, Sarah's small boutique, her only source of income, was robbed. The thieves took everything: money, inventory, and her hope of recovering anytime soon. With no job and no business, the couple's financial situations became desperate. As James and Sarah struggled to make ends meet, Sarah began noticing something. Local pastors with their big congregation and flashy lifestyles seemed untouched by the hardship that ordinary people faced. Their cars, their homes, their clothes, all of it spoke of wealth and influence. Sarah couldn't help but wonder, why not us? One evening, while scrolling through social media, she saw pictures of a pastor's elaborate church events. The photos showed crowds cheering, hands raised in worship, and people eager to give. It clicked her mind. The answer wasn't a new job or another business, it was a church. James, she said, turning to him, look at this. These pastors have everything. People need hope, and they are willing to pay anything for it. We can do this. James frowned, skeptical at first. A church? Sarah, we don't even know how to preach. We don't have to, she replied. We just need to give people what they are looking for: hope, miracles, something to believe in. We can figure out the rest as we go. After hours of tense discussion, desperation won over doubt. They decided to start a church, not out of faith, but as their way out of poverty. They chose a name that would inspire belief: Fountain of Miracle Ministries. That night, they sat together and planned their first step, a stage miracle to draw a crowd. James and Sarah started small. They rented a simple hall and set it up for their first church service. With only a handful of attendees, they knew they needed something dramatic to make an impact. To ensure people would believe in their ministry, they hired a man to fake a miracle. He arrived at the service limping on crutches, playing the role of someone desperate for healing. James stood at the front and spoke with confidence. Today, the power of God will heal the broken and restore the weak, he declared. Then he called the man forward. The man hobbled to the front, leaning heavily on crutches. The room fell silent. With a loud prayer, James laid hand on him. After a dramatic pause, the man dropped his crutches and walked. The small crowd gasped in amazement and broke into applause, convinced they had witnessed a miracle. Word spread quickly about the healing at Fountain of Miracle Ministries. By the next service, more people came, eager to experience the same power. James and Sarah's plan was working. As the word of miracles spread, the congregation at Fountain of Miracle Ministry grew rapidly. Weeks after week, new faces filled the hall, eager for blessings and breakthrough. With the growing crowd came an increased flow of donations. James and Sarah urged the congregation to sow seeds of faith, promising that their giving will unlock divine blessings. The members gave generously, some out of belief, others out of desperation. The donations poured in, and the ministry coffer overflowed. With their newfound wealth, James and Sarah's lifestyle changed dramatically. They moved into a sprawling mansion, filled their closet with designer clothes, and drove luxury cars. The couple who had once struggled to pay bills now lived like royalty. The ministry itself expanded. The small rented hall was replaced with a larger, more impressive venue. State-of-the-art sound system and elaborate decorations created an atmosphere that left attendees in awe. Every detail was designed to reinforce the illusion of divine favor. But behind the scenes, it wasn't faith driving their success, it was greed. What started as a way out of poverty had become a path to unchecked extravagance, funded by the trust and sacrifices of their followers. The church was growing, but so were the expectations. People wanted more than promises and stage healings. They wanted miracles that couldn't be explained. Sarah felt pressure building with every passing day. Something had to change, or they would lose everything. One evening, Sarah turned to James with an idea that had been haunting her. "We need real power," she said. Her voice calm but firm. James looked at her confused. "What do you mean?" he asked. Sarah hesitated before explaining. She had heard about rituals, sacrifices that could guarantee success. If they wanted to keep growing, they needed to go further. James was stunned. "You are talking about ritual, a sacrifice? That's madness," he said, shaking his head. But Sarah didn't back down. "We've come too far to stop now, James. Do you want to lose everything we've built? I'm willing to do this for us." When James asked what the sacrifice would be, Sarah looked in his eye and said, "My womb. We will offer it for power." James protested, calling it madness, but deep down, he knew she was right. The fear of failure was stronger than his doubts. Reluctantly, he agreed. On the night of the ritual, they met a mysterious figure in a dimly lit room at the back of the church. Symbols were drawn on the floor, and air smelled of burning herbs. Sarah stepped into the center, her heart pounding. The figure began chanting strange words, and James stood frozen, watching in silence. As the ritual reached its climax, Sarah felt a strange cold sensation deep within her, a void she couldn't explain. When it was over, the figure spoke. "The sacrifice is accepted, but there is a price. No scripture may exist in your ministry, no Bible, no holy text. The words must come only from you." Sarah and James exchanged glances, understanding the weight of the new condition. They would have to ban Bible from their church entirely. When they left the room that night, everything had changed. From that moment on, their ministry took a darker turn. At their next service, James announced the new rule. "God speaks directly to us," he declared. "We no longer need old scriptures to guide us. His revelations are fresh and new. They flowed through us." The congregation, caught up in their trust for James and Sarah, didn't question the change. The Bibles were removed, and the sermon became entirely their own. The ritual's power was undeniable. Their sermons grew more commanding, their influence over the congregation deepened, and their wealth skyrocketed. But behind their newfound success was the heavy price they had paid, a price they could never take back. While many members embraced the new teachings without questions, a few began to grow suspicious. Among them was Elizabeth. Elizabeth had always been a devoted member of the congregation, attending every service and believing in the miracles she witnessed. But over time, subtle inconsistencies began to catch her attention. One Sunday, during the service, James called forward a woman in a wheelchair. The congregation watched in awe as she was miraculously healed. She stood, stumbled a little, then began walking, tears streaming down her face. The church erupted into cheers and applause. But Elizabeth froze. She recognized the woman immediately. It was the same woman she had seen walking effortlessly in the market just days before. Confused and uneasy, Elizabeth began to question what she had just witnessed. Was it truly a miracle or something else entirely? At first, she tried to brush it off, telling herself it must have been a misunderstanding. But the doubts grew stronger with each passing week. The extravagant lifestyle of James and Sarah, the increasingly weird sermons, and the absence of scripture all began to weigh on her mind. Determined to uncover the truth, Elizabeth started investigating quietly. She took notes, recorded sermons, tracked where donations were going, followed the trail of stage healings, and observed James' inappropriate relationship with female congregants. She even recorded suspicious interaction between church staffs and actors who played the roles of sick and disabled. The more she uncovered, the more irritated she became. What had once seemed like a holy ministry now looked like a carefully orchestrated scheme to exploit vulnerable people. Elizabeth knew she couldn't keep this to herself. The evidences was piling up, and she was determined to bring the truth to light, no matter the cost. As the church grew in size and wealth, James began to abuse his power in more personal ways. Under the guise of offering spiritual guidance, he initiated inappropriate relationship with several female congregants. He justified his action by claiming it was part of his divine calling, a special ministry to the broken-hearted, he called it. Words of James' behavior reached Sarah. At first, she dismissed it, convincing herself it was nothing more than baseless rumors. But as the stories piled up, her denial turned into anger. Jealousy consumed her as she watched her husband exploit his position and betray her trust. Despite her growing resentment, Sarah remained silent. She knew that exposing James' action would bring the entire ministry crashing down. Their empire, their wealth, and their influence, all of it depended on their carefully created image of unity and holiness. Sarah's silence became a prison. She resented James more with each passing day, but fear kept her complicit. Fear of losing everything they had built, and fear of what James might do if she spoke out. Yet, the tension between them grew, setting the stage for an inevitable explosion. It was a Sunday like any other. The church was packed with congregants, their voices raised in worship, their hearts full of expectation for another powerful service. James stood at the front, exuding confidence as he prepared to deliver his sermon. Sarah, seated nearby, watched him with a storm brewing in her heart. Weeks of silence, resentment, and betrayal had pushed Sarah to her breaking point. The sight of James confidently preaching surrounded by women who had become his part of indiscretion was too much to bear. Midway through the sermon, she snapped. Rising from her seat, she stormed onto the stage, grabbing the microphone. The congregation fell silent, their eyes fixed on her. "You're a liar, James," Sarah shouted, her voice trembling with rage. "You stand here pretending to be a man of God, but you are nothing but a cheat. How many women in this church have you slept with? How many lies have you told in the name of miracles?" Gasps and murmurs rippled through the congregation. James froze, his carefully created image crumbling before their eyes. He tried to grab the microphone, but Sarah held it tightly. In her fury, Sarah's words spilled out uncontrollable. "Do they know what we've done, James? Do they know how we built this ministry on lies? Do they know about the ritual? How I sacrificed my womb for power?" The room erupted. Shocked whispers filled the air as the truth began to sink in. The woman they had trusted to guide them had just admitted to something unimaginable. James stood there, speechless, as Sarah continued. "And these miracles, lies, actors, all of them, everything we've told you is a scam." The congregation was in chaos, some shouting in anger, others frozen in disbelief. Years of faith and trust shattered in a matter of minutes. Sarah's words had exposed the foundation of deception upon which Fountain of Miracle Ministries was built. As the congregation erupted in chaos, Elizabeth rose from her seat. For weeks, she had been quietly gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to confront the truth. Now, with Sarah's shocking confession still echoing through the room, that moment had come. She walked to the front of the church with the evidence she had gathered, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. "I've been watching," she said, her voice steady but loud enough to cut through the noise. "And I have proof of everything. Proof of the lies, the stage miracles, and the way you've exploited every person here." The room fell silent as Elizabeth pulled out her files. She held up photographs of actors who had pretended to be healed, financial records showing the misuse of donations, and testimonies from those who had been manipulated. "This woman," Elizabeth said, pointing to a photo of a woman in a wheelchair, "was healed in front of us all. But I had seen her walking days before, perfectly fine. She is an actress, paid to deceive us," she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "And the donations, they didn't go to the church. They paid for the luxury cars, designer clothes, and their mansion. They preached about blessing, but they blessed themselves." The congregation sat in stunned silence, the weight of betrayal pressing down on them. Some began to cry, while others shouted in anger. Many clutched their heads, unable to process the truth. Elizabeth turned to James and Sarah, who stood frozen. Their once commanding presence reduced to guilt and shame. You used our faith against us, she said. You lied to us, stole from us, and destroyed the very thing we came here to find hope. In that moment, the empire James and Sarah had built crumbled completely. The truth was out, and the trust they had expected so thoroughly could never be regained. The revelation shattered Fountain of Miracle Ministries. Shocked and betrayed, the congregation abandoned the church in droves. The once packed halls now stood empty, a haunting reminder of the lies that had been preached within its walls. The uproar didn't stop there. Former members demanded justice, filing complaints with authorities. Investigations revealed the depths of James and Sarah's deceit, the staged miracles, the misappropriated donations, and the exploitation of vulnerable congregants. James and Sarah, once referred as spiritual leaders, lost everything: their luxury cars, their mansions, their extravagant lifestyles, all confiscated. But the greatest loss was the trust of the community they had deceived. The empire they had built on lies had crumbled to dust. For the former members of Fountain of Miracle Ministries, the betrayal cut deep. Many had sacrificed their savings, their homes, and their future, believing in the promises of financial breakthrough and miracles. Now, they were left with nothing but heartbreak and anger. Tears flowed as stories emerged. Families who had sold their possession to sow seed of faith, widows who had given their last pennies, and young people who had pinned their dreams on promises of divine favor. Their faith, once strong, was now shattered. In the midst of the devastation, Elizabeth stepped forward once more. She encouraged the community to rebuild, not just their lives, but their faith. This is not the end, she said. Don't let their lies destroy your belief in God. Learn from this and seek truth, not showmanship. Our words planted seed of hope. Slowly, the community began to heal, grounded in the lessons learned from their painful experience. In the end, the story of James and Sarah was a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked greed and power of faith when placed in the wrong hands. Their hunger for wealth and influence had destroyed them and left countless souls in despair. But from the ashes of their deception came a lesson. Faith is not in the performance of miracles or the grandeur of a church, but in truth, humility, and a personal connection with God. As the empty house of Fountain of Miracle Ministries stood as a silent warning, one question remained: what does it profit a man to gain the whole world but lose his soul? Thank you for watching this powerful story of faith, deception, and redemption. If you've been inspired, moved, or even challenged by this tale, don't forget to hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comment section. And remember to subscribe to Naija Life Stories, because while settle for boring, when you can have a sizzling hot and extra juicy here. Bye.